Have you ever sat at a family dinner table and realized mid-conversation that they don't really see you, the real you, just the version they've decided you are? My name's Alexis Nolan. I'm 30 now, living in Kansas City, Missouri, where I run a steady freelance graphic design business from home. Things are comfortable, but I keep it low-key. My family, the Nolans, has always put image first. Success isn't about what you've built quietly. It's about what looks good on the outside, especially on social media. My dad is big on that personal branding, he calls it. He measures people by how they present themselves, the accessories they carry, the story they tell online. My older sister, Jordan Nolan, who's 34, mastered that early. She's been trying to build a lifestyle influencer career for years, always chasing the perfect post, the sponsored deal, the appearance of having it all. Me, I choose simple. I own a few quality pieces I've picked up over time, like a Hermès bag I bought secondhand because it was a good investment and I liked the craftsmanship. But day to day, I stick with my reliable old tote, no logos, no fuss. Last summer, Mom hosted one of her regular family dinners at their place. The food was great as always, everyone chatting lightly. Then Dad turned to me with that familiar smirk and said, "Alexis, you're still carrying that old bag?" The table laughed. He nodded toward Jordan's arm. Now that's the style of a modern, successful woman. More laughs, louder this time, until I said calmly, "She's been borrowing that bag from me for months." Jordan froze. Mom's face tightened. And just like that, no one was laughing anymore. That moment was only the beginning, the first crack in everything she'd built on borrowed pieces. If this already has you wondering how deep it went and how it all came crashing down at Thanksgiving, subscribe now, turn on notifications, and comment "family drama" below. You won't want to miss what came next. That evening in Kansas City was unusually cool for summer, and Mom had prepared a full roast beef dinner like she always did for these gatherings. The driveway was packed when I arrived, so I parked down the street and walked up with my old tote slung over my shoulder. Jordan's sleek white SUV was front and center, shining under the porch light as if it was part of the display. Inside the house smelled amazing garlic herbs and that familiar comfort of home-cooked food. My Aunt Irene was already there helping Mom set the table, chatting about her latest book club pick. We all settled around the big oak table in the dining room, plates passing back and forth with the usual small talk about work and the weather. Dad was in high spirits, launching into one of his favorite topics, personal branding. He went on about how in today's world it's not just what you do, but how you present it online that matters most, especially for younger people trying to get ahead. Jordan nodded along eagerly, sharing how her Instagram follower count had hit a new milestone, and she was close to landing some real sponsorships. Then Dad's eyes landed on my tote resting by my chair. He smirked and said, "Alexis, you're still carrying that old bag." A few chuckles rippled around the table, including from Aunt Irene, who added lightly, "If it works, why change it?" But Dad wasn't letting it go. He gestured across to Jordan, where the Hermès sat prominently on the table beside her plate, like an accessory on purpose. "Now that's the style of a modern, successful woman," he said, his voice carrying that proud tone he always used for her. "It tells the world you're serious, put together, someone who invests in quality." Jordan leaned back with a big smile, laughing louder than anyone, and pulled out her phone to show a couple of recent stories she'd posted, shots of her at a local cafe. The bag featured prominently in every frame, captioned with things like "elevating the everyday" and "timeless pieces for timeless ambitions." Everyone oohed and nodded approvingly, the conversation turning to how smart she was to build her brand that way. I stayed quiet for a bit, fork in hand, feeling that familiar tightness in my chest from years of these comparisons, the subtle ways I'd always been positioned as the practical one while Jordan was the shining star. Finally, I set my fork down and looked straight at Dad. "Funny you mention that bag," I said calmly. The room quieted a little. Jordan's smile faltered. I turned to her. She's been borrowing it from me for months now, using it mainly for those photo shoots. Jordan's face went still for a second before she forced a laugh. Come on, it's just temporary until I get my own, she said quickly, waving it off like it was no big deal. Dad blinked, looking between us, clearly caught off guard, his fork hovering midair. Mom jumped in fast, stacking a few plates and suggesting dessert, soon to shift the mood. The laughs had stopped, completely replaced by an awkward silence that hung heavier than the summer humidity outside. I excused myself shortly after, saying I had an early client call the next day, even though it wasn't true. Driving home in my reliable sedan, jaw tight, I felt that old exhaustion settle, in the kind that came from always being measured against someone else's highlight reel from childhood on. A few weeks after that dinner, Jordan started texting to keep the bag longer. At first it seemed reasonable. She messaged saying a couple of upcoming shoots required that elevated look, and she promised it would just be another month or so. To make it feel less like borrowing from family, she suggested sending a small monthly fee, something symbolic, like $200 to cover wear and tear. I agreed, figuring it kept things professional between us and avoided any sense of entitlement. She even added that she'd tag me in posts whenever the bag appeared, giving me credit as the owner who lent it out. The money came through Venmo promptly the first time, with a note saying, "Thanks sis, building the dream." I didn't mind at that point. My freelance work was steady, and the bag mostly sat in my closet anyway. But as summer turned hotter in Kansas City, I noticed the Hermès showing up more often on her Instagram stories and feed, paired with outfits at brunches, rooftop events. Even casual walks in the park, always positioned just right in the frame to catch the light on that iconic hardware. None of the posts mentioned me or tagged my account, even though she'd promised. When I brought it up casually in a text, "Hey, remember to tag if you use it," she replied quickly with excuses about how the content flowed better without extra tags, and brands preferred a clean, personal aesthetic. "It's helping me negotiate a bigger deal," she wrote, "so I need the image to stay consistent right now. You'll get the shout out once it's locked in." I let it slide initially, not wanting to seem petty, but the pattern continued into the next month. The second payment arrived a few days late, with another promise that this was the home stretch. By then, I'd see notifications of her new posts almost daily, the bag becoming a staple in her grid, like it was hers all along. Friends from our old circle even commented on her photos, complimenting, "You're gorgeous, Hermès," and she never corrected them. One evening, after spotting yet another untagged story, I called her directly. She picked up, sounding rushed background noise suggesting she was out somewhere trendy. I mentioned the tagging again and how the bag was starting to feel more permanent. Jordan sighed on the line, explaining that potential sponsors were reviewing her profile closely and any inconsistency could hurt the pitch. "I just need to maintain the vibe a little longer," she said. "You're not even using it. Why does it matter so much?" That stung more than I expected, echoing the old dynamic where my quieter choices were dismissed. Before I could respond fully, Dad called me the next day, something he rarely did unless it involved family logistics. His voice was calm but firm as he asked about the bag situation, saying Jordan had mentioned I was pressing her on it. He reminded me how hard she was working to build a career in a tough space, adding that I was already established with my design clients and didn't need the spotlight. "Help your sister out," he urged. "She's got real pressure to look the part. Family supports each other through these things." Hanging up, I stared at my phone for a long time, realizing how easily the boundaries were blurring. What started as a simple loan was turning into something expected, almost owed, with everyone aligning to protect Jordan's image, while mine stayed invisible. By mid-fall, when golden leaves covered just about every street in Kansas City, I received a strange email from a major luxury brand. The subject line was straightforward: verification request for brand ambassador application. At first, I thought it was spam and almost deleted it, but the sender domain checked out as legitimate, one of those high-end labels that partners with influencers for long-term campaigns. The message asked me to confirm personal details and provide additional proof of lifestyle alignment, including ownership history of certain signature items. Curious, I opened the attached application summary, and my stomach dropped as I scrolled through. There was my full name, Alexis Nolan, listed as the applicant. The address matched the old family home where Jordan still received some mail. Even an outdated secondary email of mine, one I'd stopped using years ago but never fully deactivated, was listed as the primary contact, meaning messages still forwarded to my main inbox without me noticing until now. Deeper in the document, the submission included several photos pulled from older social media posts of mine lifestyle shots from trips or events where I'd casually carried the Hermès bag back when I first bought it. The narrative built around them claimed consistent ownership over multiple years, positioning the bag as a longtime staple in the applicant's wardrobe. Captions from Jordan's recent posts were referenced too, but rephrased to sound like they came from the same person, creating an illusion of long-term authenticity that the brand clearly valued for their ambassador program. I sat back rereading everything twice to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. Jordan had submitted this without ever mentioning it to me, using shared family details and my past content to bolster her profile. The brand required proof of sustained luxury ownership to avoid partnering with people who just rented or borrowed for appearances, and she'd bridged that gap by blending our histories into one seamless story. Shock turned quickly to a cold anger as I opened Instagram and started scrolling through her grid with new eyes. Post after post featured the bag prominently held during coffee runs slung over her shoulder at networking events, even laid out flat in flat lay compositions with captions about investment pieces that last seasons. Comments from followers praised her collection, and she'd liked or replied to many without ever clarifying the truth. I began screenshotting everything methodically, dates, captions, the way the bag's wear patterns matched mine, exactly details only the real owner would know. The more I dug, the clearer the pattern became. This wasn't just about keeping the bag longer. It was about claiming ownership entirely for the sake of a bigger opportunity. The application even referenced years of curating timeless accessories, pulling language straight from a blog post I'd written ages ago on my design site. By evening, I'd compiled a folder of evidence on my laptop, heart racing with the realization that my identity had been quietly folded into hers to make the pitch more convincing. Late in October, I decided to dig deeper into Jordan's old Instagram connections. With the application discovery still fresh, I spent evenings reviewing her past collaborations, looking for patterns beyond just the bag. One name stood out from a couple years back, a small influencer named Peyton who'd partnered with Jordan on a few sponsored posts promoting local brands. Their content had seemed promising at the time, but the joint account they'd set up went quiet suddenly, and Peyton's own feed showed no more mentions of the projects. I hesitated at first, but eventually sent Peyton a direct message, keeping it brief. I explained I was Jordan's sister, mentioned coming across some overlapping details in a brand submission, and asked if she'd be open to chatting about their past work together. To my surprise, she replied within hours, suggesting a quick call instead of messaging back and forth. When we connected, Peyton sounded cautious but not hostile. After I shared a bit more about the ambassador application and how my information had been used without permission, she opened up right away. It turned out she'd felt burned by the whole experience. Jordan had promised shared revenue from the collabs, but after initial posts went live, payments for Peyton's graphic contributions never materialized, and Jordan stopped responding to follow-ups altogether. Peyton forwarded several email threads to me during the call, screenshots of conversations where Jordan hyped big upcoming deals that would make it worth the wait, only for the partnerships to fall through on Jordan's end due to missed deadlines or changed terms. One contract draft even showed Jordan committing to deliverables she later backed out of, leaving Peyton to deal with disappointed brands alone. As we talked longer, Peyton mentioned noticing a habit. Jordan often borrowed items from collaborators or friends for shoots, presenting them as her own to fit the luxurious aesthetic sponsors wanted. It wasn't just once, Peyton said. She'd return things late or not at all, always with some story about how it helped everyone's visibility. Peyton had cut ties quietly to avoid drama in the small Kansas City influencer circle, but the unpaid work still stung. Hearing it laid out like that made the isolated incidents with the bag feel part of something larger, a recurring way Jordan built her online presence on other people's efforts and belongings. I thanked Peyton sincerely for trusting me with the details, and she wished me luck sorting it out, adding that she was glad someone was finally holding Jordan accountable. Back at my desk that night, I organized everything she'd sent into the growing evidence folder, time-stamped emails, contract snippets, messages showing broken promises. Combined with my own records of the bag posts and the brand's verification request, the picture was becoming undeniable. This wasn't a one-off mistake, but a deliberate strategy to appear more established than she actually was. The weight of it settled in, slowly shifting my frustration into a clearer resolve to protect what was mine before things escalated further. A few weeks before Thanksgiving, I arranged to meet Dad alone at a familiar coffee shop in Kansas City. The spot was one we'd gone to for years, tucked in a quiet neighborhood with worn wooden tables and the constant hum of the espresso machine. Dad showed up in his usual button-down shirt, greeting me with a quick hug before grabbing his black coffee and joining me in a booth away from the morning crowd. He started with the standard questions about my recent projects and whether business was picking up as the holidays approached. I waited until we were settled before opening my tablet and pulling up a carefully selected set of screenshots. I kept it straightforward, beginning with the luxury brand's verification email that had landed in my inbox because of the forwarded address. Then I walked him through a few of Jordan's posts where the Hermès bag was front and center, paired with captions implying years of ownership that simply didn't match reality. Dad listened quietly at first, stirring his coffee more than drinking it. When I brought up the details from Peyton about the unpaid collabs and repeated pattern of overpromising, his brow furrowed. He glanced at the images but didn't linger, shifting in his seat as the conversation deepened. His response came down to concern over family reputation more than anything else. "If this gets out bigger than it needs to, it could affect all of us," he said, keeping his voice low. "Jordan's got ambition. Sometimes it pushes her too far, but making a scene won't fix that. It'll just give people something to talk about." I tried handing him the tablet to scroll through the rest, including the email threads Peyton had shared, but he pushed it back gently. He talked about how Jordan was under pressure to stand out in a competitive space, and that these things happened when someone was hungry for success. "Let it go for the sake of peace," he urged. "Your mom and I don't want tension spoiling the holidays, and Jordan doesn't need this kind of setback right now." We went back and forth for a while, with him repeating that family stuck together through mistakes, and that I was in a stronger position anyway, not needing to prove anything. No matter how I framed the boundary violations, he reframed them as youthful overreach best handled privately. By the time we stood to leave, the coffee had gone cold, and so had any hope I'd held for him seeing my side clearly. Driving away, the realization settled that Dad's loyalty would always lean toward preserving the family's outward image and Jordan's potential, regardless of the cost to fairness. Thanksgiving that year turned the parents' house in Kansas City into a packed gathering, with relatives and old family friends filling every room. The air carried the rich sense of turkey stuffing and pumpkin pie as people mingled in the living room and kitchen, catching up on the past year while kids ran around outside in the crisp fall weather. Mom had outdone herself with the spread on the long dining table extended into the den, and everyone was in high spirits after the big meal plates cleared and coffee poured for dessert. Jordan, dressed sharply in a tailored outfit that highlighted her polished look, stood near the fireplace holding a small wireless mic someone had brought for toasts. She cleared her throat with a bright smile and thanked Mom for hosting before turning to the room. "I have some exciting news to share," she announced, voice carrying confidently. After months of hard work building my online presence, I've been selected as a finalist for a major brand ambassador role with a luxury label many of you know. The contract is almost finalized, and it's going to open so many doors. Applause broke out immediately, with Aunt Irene clapping enthusiastically and several cousins cheering. Dad beamed from his armchair, raising his glass slightly as he stood to add a few words. "That's my girl," he said proudly. "Jordan's always had the drive to make things happen, and this is proof of what focus and branding can do. We're all behind you." The energy in the room lifted even higher, people congratulating her as she passed around her phone to show teaser emails from the brand team. I sat quietly on the couch-edged laptop bag at my feet, feeling the moment build like a wave I could no longer hold back. When the noise died down a bit, I stood and asked politely if I could borrow the TV for a quick presentation, something to clarify a few things before the celebration continued. Mom looked surprised but nodded, handing over the remote while Dad gave me a curious glance. I connected my laptop quickly, heart steady despite the dozens of eyes turning my way. The first slide appeared, a scanned receipt from my second-hand purchase of the Hermès bag years earlier, time-stamped and highlighted next to a current photo of it in my closet. "This bag has been mine since that date," I said simply. Gasps rippled softly. Jordan's smile tightened. Second slide, side-by-side screenshots of her posts, featuring the bag over months with no tags or credits to me, alongside Venmo records showing inconsistent small payments. "It's been on loan, but presented differently." Murmurs grew louder, heads turning toward Jordan. Third slide, the brand's verification email addressed to me with key sections circled, showing how my details filled gaps in the application. This landed in my inbox because shared information was used to support claims of long-term ownership. Dad shifted uncomfortably, face paling. Jordan gripped the mic stand harder. Fourth slide selected messages from Peyton documenting unpaid work and canceled commitments, timestamps visible. This isn't isolated, it's part of a pattern others have experienced too. The room fell silent except for a few sharp intakes of breath. Jordan's face drained of color, eyes wide as she searched for words. Dad stared at the screen without speaking, arms crossed tightly. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, the festive mood evaporating completely. I closed the laptop and faced everyone calmly. "I just wanted the truth out there. Now you all know." Without waiting for responses, I gathered my things and walked out the front door into the cool evening air, leaving the whispers behind. A few days after Thanksgiving, the consequences started to show. The luxury brand wasted no time. They sent Jordan a formal email demanding an explanation for the discrepancies in her application, citing the verification process that had flagged inconsistencies with the provided ownership proof. Within a week, her candidacy was officially withdrawn, and they made it clear there would be no future opportunities due to the misrepresentation. Word spread quietly at first through industry contacts, but soon enough other potential sponsors pulled back from conversations they'd been having with her. Her follower count, which had been climbing steadily, began dropping in noticeable chunks. Comments on older posts turned skeptical, with some people in the local influencer community sharing screenshots of the Thanksgiving slides that had made the rounds via group chats and private stories. Unfollows accelerated as the narrative shifted from aspirational to unreliable, and several smaller brands she'd worked with in the past distanced themselves publicly with vague statements about valuing authenticity. Jordan called me multiple times over the following week, leaving voicemails that started apologetic, but quickly turned defensive. "We need to talk this out," she said in one. "You made it sound way worse than it was. It's just a misunderstanding, and you blew it up in front of everyone." When I didn't answer, the messages grew sharper, insisting I'd overreacted and ruined her momentum over something trivial. Texts from my parents came soon after. Dad wrote that I'd destroyed the holiday spirit for the whole family and put unnecessary stress on Mom. She followed with a longer note about how disappointed they were that I couldn't have handled it privately, adding that Jordan was going through a tough time now because of the fallout. Neither acknowledged the core issue, focusing instead on how my actions had embarrassed them in front of relatives and friends. I read everything, once felt the familiar pull of guilt they always managed to stir, then made the decision without second guessing. One evening, after wrapping a client project, I blocked their numbers, emails, and social accounts across all platforms. No dramatic announcement, just a clean cut. The no contact choice settled in as permanent a boundary I finally enforced after years of bending. Months later, life in Kansas City felt lighter than it had in a long time. My graphic design work picked up with new referrals, and I poured energy into projects that were mine alone. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. Looking back, the real takeaway is simple: standing up for yourself, even when it means losing people who were supposed to be family, is worth it if it means keeping your peace. Appearances crumble eventually, truth doesn't. Thank you so much for sticking with this story all the way to the end. If any part resonated with you or reminded you of your own experiences, drop a comment below. I read them all. What would you have done in my place? Share your thoughts, and if you know someone dealing with similar family dynamics, pass this along. See you in the next one.